Hello, everyone. Welcome to What You Need to Know About Boxing, Episode 7. I'm your host, Phil Likes Fights. If that opening sounds a little bit foreign to you, that's okay. I'm trying out a little bit of rebranding. I wanted a more formal name for the show, and I think just having a self titled podcast is fine, but I do think that the new rebrand is a little bit more attention grabbing, which is always a benefit. I hope that this becomes more snappy, more to the point, and having this podcast become essentially a mechanism of exactly the title, what you need to know. I want to inform those who are listening and watching with everything in the world of boxing. To this point, I've been predominantly doing boxing recaps and predictions, but I've neglected a lot of news that has come up as of late, and I believe that it is important to incorporate said news and announcements in the show as well. So, from henceforth, this is what you need to know about boxing. And the first thing you need to know is what happened last weekend. So let's get right into it. First things first, Ben Whittaker, Liam Cameron. They had the rematch, they settled the beef, and one man came out on top, that being the man with the Olympic background, the man who has all the stardom headed towards him. That was Ben Whittaker. Now, again, I had predicted Ben Whittaker to win by a unanimous decision. He instead knocks out Liam Cameron in just the second round. Now, there is controversy, of course, around the stoppage, which we'll get into. But first, just as a overall thought on the performance, this is what I believe the British public was expecting the first time around. Whether or not you're familiar with Ben Whittaker, he is a rising star, a man that is able to generate audiences that, quite frankly, are almost impossible to do in modern boxing. If you find any of the highlight videos that showcase him at his best against lesser opposition, they are generating tens of millions of views. I think it was very important to have Ben Whittaker win this fight, just because of the upside that he does provide in what is already an amazing division at men's light heavyweight, 175 pounds. Now, to the performance itself, I thought that this was obviously beyond my expectation. I had predicted him to win by a decision. But even more so than that, I think this was a Whittaker that finally realized that all the talk, all the showboating, things that I don't even mind, by the way, they don't win fights. And I had mentioned how the team up with his new trainer, Andy Lee, was going to be beneficial. I don't think that we saw the full fruits of that labor, just because of, again, how short the contest was. But I liked his mentality. It was a seek and destroy mission. And he did what he should have done. Look, for all of the great stuff that Liam Cameron has done of late, obviously, of course, you can highlight the first Ben Whittaker fight. He also had a very respectable appearance against Lyndon Arthur in a very close fight he arguably could have won. Liam Cameron is just not on the level of Ben Whittaker, and their fights should never have been close. Liam Cameron is a man that used to fight, I believe, at middleweight, and is now campaigning at 175, 168. Just in terms of physicality, the athletic difference, everything was on the side of Ben Whittaker here, and it played out to the utmost degree. For the stoppage itself, look, I think that if you even go to Twitter, one of, I think, the absolute best pages on there is Takeru or Talkers. If you look on him, I think it's at a Talker, Tokkers 5 on Twitter. He posts very often and very good stuff, but he had highlighted how the referee in that bout, which, let me briefly jog my memory here. It's on the tip of my tongue, but again, I always aim to, provide precise. Oh, Howard Foster. There, I didn't even have to look it up. It came to me. So yeah, Howard Foster was the man refereeing this fight. Howard Foster, throughout the years, has been shown to be a very pro A-side referee. He absolutely gives British fighters the benefit of the doubt when, or I should say A-side British fighters the benefit of the doubt, and immediately looks to stop a fight when a B-side is going to lose. even with that being the case, I think a big thing to judge when assessing a stoppage is body language. Liam Cameron did not protest whatsoever. And for whatever you want to say about Liam Cameron, he is a man with some pride. And I think that if the stoppage was truly completely unjustifiable, he would have protested. But I think he got hit with just a perfect shot his equilibrium. He started to do some kind of chicken dance, and Whittaker pounced on him, rightfully so. Now, there was a lot of controversy around after Whittaker had won the fight. He had went over to the corner and screamed at Liam Cameron's coach. Some people even said he spit on him. That was proven not to be true. But beyond that, look, Ben Whittaker, since the first Liam Cameron fight, has had to go through hell. He has had to go through the same millions of people that watched his highlights now berate him on the internet, chastise him, call him a fraud, call him no good, call him a man that only fights binmen, all of this stuff, say that he was exposed. He had to deal with that for months, and all of that was aggravated by the people in Liam Cameron's team. They went on for months about how Ben Whittaker was scared to take this over 12 rounds, that he's running and making it a 10-round fight because he's scared. All of this rhetoric. It is a lot to put on the back of a relatively new boxer to the professional game. And I think that Ben Whittaker was really within his right to have any sort of emotional outburst he wanted after an emphatic win that he had. So maybe this is the difference between an American point of view and a British point of view. I know that Brits are very up in arms over decorum and manners, politeness. We're going to get to that later when talking about Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. But it's the fight game. It's dirty. It's gritty. It's hard. One man loses and one man wins. And I think Whittaker, he didn't even overstep the line. If he did spit, maybe I'd have sympathies towards those arguments, but he yelled at a guy. Let's move on. And let's actually, further than that, move on. Let's move on to the rest of this card I wanted to highlight. So I had predicted that Frazier Clark would get back into the winners column with a knockout. I had predicted the 4th round. Ultimately, he knocks out Ebenezer Tete in the 1st. Look, Ebenezer Tete is a very interesting heavyweight. I'm sure he's a nice guy. He has a lot of funny moments, but he is just not elite, not on the level of a Frazier Clark. I know that Clark was coming off of that massive jaw injury in which his entire jaw had shifted out the side of his face. But even with all that, this was a mismatch. Look, Tete, he went 7 rounds with Dillian Whyte, but I think that more so is an indictment on Dillian Whyte and what he has left in his career, because Ebenezer Tete is a man that you should be knocking down like a domino, like Frazier Clark did, like Daniel Dubois did. So good on Frazier Clark. I think the obvious next fight for him is that British heavyweight title, which is going to be contested in a rematch between David Adelaide and Jimmy TKV. I don't know how long that will take. I don't know if Frazier Clark wants to sit out. Considering how fast he came back after his last fight, if he can't get the British title fight next due to scheduling reasons, I imagine he'll take another stay busy fight because he's not getting any younger. Let's move on here. Oh, so this one I was very happy with. So Sam Eggington took on Lee Cutler, and this was a fight that I thought was a very evenly matched, evenly scheduled bout. One that I didn't foresee a clear winner, but I just went through who have these people been fighting. Like, what is your level of opposition? Sam Eggington. Now, I didn't prepare this, so for a proof of concept, let me introduce this to you all. In his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In his last 9 fights, he has a record of 7-2, which is not amazing by boxing standards. But his 2 losses are to Dennis Hogan by majority decision and Abbas Barao by majority decision. Whereas Lee Cutler had never been on the level of a Dennis Hogan or an Abasparao. These are men who have been in the world title picture, not British titles, not English titles, world titles. I felt the experience of Eggington would be too much, and his pressure, very good pressure fighter. Now, this fight was stopped because of a cut over Eggington's eye, went to the scorecards. One judge had it 90-83 in favor of Eggington, which is a criminal scorecard. That's a kind of scorecard that should be sent to the Athletic Commission, and they should consider banning that judge for life. That is Judge Alexander Walter. Make a note of that name. Don't let that man officiate your fights. He can't judge. But the other scorecards read out 87-85, which I thought were exactly correct for Sam Eggington, who picks up a technical decision win. Finally, Tyler Denny took on Elvis Ahorga from Ghana, I believe, and won a scrappy, competitive, but clear-cut 97-92 decision. Very good stuff from Tyler Denny. I like him a lot. I think it would actually be a privilege to interview him, hopefully. Very fun fighter. Very fun. I think that he doesn't get the exposure he really deserves. I know that this fight wasn't exactly a blockbuster, but it's understandable considering that he was coming off of a pretty devastating loss, looking to get back into the swing of things. And Elvis Ahorga is a big guy. I understand that he's campaigning at middleweight, but in Ahorga's last fight against Callum Simpson, when he lost in 5 rounds, that I think is the size that he really belongs in with. Tyler Denny is not a large middleweight, at least by frame wise. So that's where I thought the physical nature would come into play. Let's move on here, though. This was overall a really good card. I had a lot of fun watching. And here we go. Okay, we're going to get right into it. Everyone's hopefully favorite segment. I really like doing these things. Who's that fighter? And this is a man that I implore you. Yes, we're going to remember Alexander Walter's name because he's a horrible judge. But we're going to remember this guy because I do think he is a future world title contender. This is a man that I was absolutely impressed with over the weekend. That is Ruslan Abdullayev. So moving over here to the Golden Boy fight night that happened over the weekend. By the way, in case you've noticed this, I kind of had to do a quick Photoshop because the referee is holding his arm, but it looks weird. So then it's whatever. We're going to move on beyond that. But this is Ruslan Abdullayev. He took on a man by the name of Gino Rodrigo from the Philippines. Now, I don't expect you to know who that is, but this is Abdullayev's second pro fight. Gino Rodrigo, 2 fights ago, had fought Elvis Rodriguez, who is a top contender in the 140-pound division, had a really close fight with Elvis Rodriguez and knocked him down. He went on to, after that fight, took on the 15-0-1 Matthew Gonzalez in Philadelphia and knocked him out in the very first round. So you're talking about a guy here in Gino Rodrigo who, not the best record, 13-4-2, but is coming off of a spirited performance against a top contender in Elvis Rodriguez, and then a first-round knockout win over a 16-fight undefeated contender. And here is the 1-0, now 2-0, boxing prodigy, upstart prospect, the 22-year-old Uzbek, Ruslan Abdullayev. And although this went to a decision, this was one-way traffic. I believe he even scored a knockdown at one point in that fight. Shut out on the cards, 80-71. And I don't blame him for not finding the stoppage. Again, Gino Rodrigo, not the best record, but a battle-tested veteran. And Abdullayev just had a really impressive performance for a man that is, again, 2-0 in the professional ranks, already has a WBA regional title. Look for him to move up the ranks quickly and impressively. I really like what I saw from him. I have to shout him out in the Who's That Fighter segment. But let's move on from that to talk about the rest of the Golden Boy fight night. So, Gabriela Fundora took on Marilyn Badillo, and I had predicted Fundora to win by knockout in the 9th round. She, even even surpassed my expectations. Got the knockout 2 rounds earlier, a 7th round stoppage where Badillo just couldn't take the punishment, couldn't take the pressure. And I am so glad that all of the flowers that I gave Fundora on the last episode bloomed, because it is time to start respecting Gabriela Fundora if you do not already. She's clearly top 5 pound for pound. If you have any disagreement with that, let me know what your top 5 female fighters pound for pound are. There is not 5 other women in the world that are better than Gabriela Fundora. There just are not. You have Clarissa Shields, sure. You have Katie Taylor, absolutely. You have Amanda Serrano, I'll hear you out. But after that, you really have to start making good cases for why any of these other women are better than Gabriela Fundora to this point. And you have to factor in the knockout factor. So Gabriela Fundora is what? Coming off of 1, 2... Okay, the decision against that. Okay. Gabriela Fundora in her last 5 fights has 4 knockouts. Find me another elite female fighter, so either a woman who is a champion or a top contender who has an 80% knockout rate in her last 5 fights. And when you can present that to me, then you have to go by the resume. Well, who are you beating? Because Gabriela Fundora is now knocking out her undefeated challenger, Badillo, stopping Gabriela Alaniz, who just dethroned, what's her name? Marlon Esparza, yes, and stopping Christina Cruz, who is, again, a very accomplished amateur who is undefeated. Yeah, you're not going to find that. I don't believe it exists. It's time to really respect Gabriela Fundora as one of the best female fighters in the world, if not one of the best fighters in the world, regardless of gender. She is really phenomenal. And hopefully, obviously, main eventing is a big spotlight, but I want her in bigger and bigger spotlights. Find a way, do some co-promotional deal with Premier Boxing Champions, try to get a Sebastian Fundora, Gabriela Fundora, brother, sister, co-headliner. Find a way to make her a pay-per-view attraction. She's promotable. And let's talk about this too. All the women at the top of the game right now. Katie Taylor is how old? 38, I think. You have Amanda Serrano, who's 40? Or no, 30, 37, something like that. Let's see. So Katie Taylor age. We're going to go on a little trip here. She's 38. Okay. Amanda Serrano age. She is 36. Well, Clarissa Shields is quite young, right? I think Clarissa Shields is 30. Oh, she's 30. Okay, I was going to say 28, actually. She's 30. Now let's contrast that with Gabriela Fundora. Gabriela Fundora, wait, I just had it. Come on. Is 23 years of age. She's 23, and she's at 112 pounds. She's going to start moving up through those weight classes, getting older, more experience, more tools and skills. This is a future face of the sport, and I'm not this aggressive in my predictions or my forecasts that often, but if Gabriela Fundora was a stock, you should put some money in her portfolio right now. It's about as succinctly and as powerful as I can say it. Fantastic performance. Let's move on to that co-main event. So, this man, according to certain people online, in boxing circles, this was the most avoided super welterweight in the world. I'm not going to say anyone's name in particular, but you know who you are. That this man is getting ducked by Xander Zayas, that Bakram Murtazaliyev doesn't want to fight him, that apparently all these other contenders, they don't want to fight Charles Conwell. Well, one man did want to fight Charles Conwell. Then it's Jorge Garcia Perez. And now you might go, well, hold on, Philip. You predicted Conwell to win by decision. Well, you're just as wrong as anyone else. And sure, I have to take the L here. I predicted Charles Conwell to win by unanimous decision. But really quickly, if I might, I want to see if there's any way I can get this in a very succinct fashion here. But what I said on the last show was exactly correct beyond the actual prediction itself. So let's see if I can get that clip here. I believe I can. Oh yeah, here we go. So let's see. A win here would really solidify him as a future world title contender, and I'm going to back him. I'm going to say that Charles Conwell picks up a smart yet scrappy unanimous decision. So I'm gonna, so I don't know if this is going through, so I'm gonna translate a little bit, but I said I'm going to back him to get a smart but scrappy unanimous decision, and then Garcia will have several moments. Garcia may even hurt Charles. Garcia may hurt Charles Conwell. Possibility here, but Conwell, I think he'll find the way to win. I think it will be hard. It'll be hard. He'll be heavily criticized. By yep, if you don't understand the but again, Pettis quite good. Yep, quite good. Mm-hmm. Got a few losses, sure, but I expect him to bring it, and an upset here would not shock me whatsoever. Boom! There I am, on tape, on record. What did I say last time? An upset would not shock me. It came to fruition. Yeah, Garcia. It's time to start taking him seriously. We could see Garcia in there with a Virgil Ortiz. We could see him in there with any big names at 154. This is a great win now on his resume, combined with the other great wins he's been racking up. I highlighted the Rourke Knopp win, the win over Abdukakharov. He's got good wins, and he is a good contender at this 154-pound weight class. Very long, very lanky, good power, great performance. Let's move on. So I didn't even get to highlight this. So when I was making my predictions for this card, there was no BoxRec page. There was no anything on their the Golden Boy website. So I basically only had the main and co-main event. But Alexander Vazdik returned on this card. He picked up a successful knockout win to get back in the mix. The fight was at cruiserweight, but again, because of the horrible media coverage around this event, I have no idea if the fight was at cruiserweight just because, it's a comeback bout and you're not. Yeah, okay. It wasn't even at cruiserweight. It was at 179.5. I only got to watch this in spurts. So he's probably going to still campaign at 175 pounds. But I thought he looked good. I don't think that he looked completely shot. Obviously, you have to judge a comeback fight by what it is. It's not going to be the best version of Vozdik. But it was a good performance, and 175 can use all the contenders. It could just use any number of contenders because that division's on fire, and there's plenty of good names to fight next. And potentially world titles are going to fragment soon. We've already seen Bivol give up the WBC title to David Benavidez. It's not unlikely that more belts will continue to fragment, especially the IBF. Let's move on to this card. Now, I don't even want to take more than 5 minutes to recap this. I barely wanted to even spend 5 minutes talking about it the first time, but for the sake of consistency, let's go through it. So, Dalton Smith took on Mathieu Germain, and I figured Dalton Smith is putting together a lot of knockouts recently. Germain has 2 losses, both of them by stoppage. I figured this was an easy fight to predict, but no, instead, Dalton Smith does not get a 6th round KO. He goes to a unanimous decision, and I don't even want to talk about the fight. I'm going to talk about 2 things. I'm going to talk about the broadcast of this fight, and then I'm going to talk about what comes next. Because the fight was very nondescript. I guess now I'm going to talk about it, but Germain basically boxed on the back foot. Smith came forward, looked to land huge shots, landed sparsely, but when he landed, he hurt Germain. Okay, let's move on from that. The broadcast was literally career malpractice. There's no other way to describe it. When you have commentators saying that the knockout's coming any second, look at the way that Dalton Smith is landing a shot. Oh, he's hurting Germain. Oh, he's going to knock him out. And you drone on for this for all 35 of the 36 minutes of the fight. If you just hammer away, knockout is coming, and it doesn't happen, you are doing a very poor job. A very poor job. Because, now why do I say 35 or 36 minutes? Because, of course, in the final minutes, then they pivot to, Dalton Smith needed that experience. He needed the rounds. This was a great test for him. This was so good to get him experience. Complete flip-floppy nonsense, if I'm being quite candid, which is my objective on this show. Don't talk about how a knockout is coming for 12 rounds to then have no knockout and then say how good it was that there was no knockout. You can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too, etc., etc. Now, this fight does solidify. It was already solidified, but this fight, I guess, keeps the idea going that Alberto Puello should be next for Dalton Smith. Now, we're going to get to some news later in the show talking about why that is a problem. That being that Puello now has a scheduled fight with Subriel Matias, which I'm going to get to later. But I don't think Eddie Hearn had knowledge that there was a fight coming up soon. I had seen that Alberto Puello was allowed to make a voluntary title defense before facing his mandatory in Dalton Smith. And I love you Brits, right? I love the British commentators. Not that I love them, but I appreciate what they do. A lot of Americans, not myself, but I don't want to name names, but a lot of Americans sort of treat British boxing as a joke, if I'm being quite honest. They sort of don't take British fighters seriously. They think that it's all a big game, basically. It's quite annoying to see how dismissive a lot of American boxing people are about the British boxing scene. Now, that being said, I see so many Brits. Now, a lot of these guys are also with the network that Dalton Smith is with, but they're claiming, oh, yes, Smith, that title's just waiting for him. Time to, knock off Puello, get that title, no problem. I don't see that whatsoever. I thought that if you couldn't find a way to at least really pummel Germain, I don't know how you're getting to Puello. Puello now has a win over Gary Antoine Russell, who is now a title holder. He has a win over Sandor Martin. Yes, that was a close fight, but Sandor Martin arguably had a better performance versus Teofimo Lopez, who's another belt holder in this division. You could argue that if Puello does beat a Subriel Matias, that he's the number one guy at 140 pounds. You really could make that argument. I'm not so sure if I'm endorsing that, but I don't treat it as absurd. So for all of you Brits that want to say that Dalton Smith is going to basically easily knock off a guy that's arguably the best 140-pounder, yeah, hold your horses. Honestly, I think that Alberto Puello taking this fight against Subriel Matias is a good thing for Dalton Smith. You really want to talk about experience? Don't have your international 140-pound contender in Germain here be a guy who is, how old again? Okay, 35, coming off some whatever kind of wins. Let's find a real, solid, tough test at 140 pounds. Yes, you're risking Dalton Smith's mandatory status, but you know what? If he doesn't get the experience he needs, well, he's not winning a world title anyway. Now, maybe you want to cash him out, I suppose, but I don't think that is the idea. I say give Smith one more fight before world title shot. Let's move on, though, because now I spent way more than 5 minutes on it, but listen, this show is also about how I feel and what I want to say, so sometimes you just got to go with the tides. But rest of this card, so of course this poster was wrong. Ishmael Davis pulled out. I had picked Aguirre to win by a unanimous decision. I think he won by split decision. But yeah, he's just slightly better than this guy Kelly here. Kind of nondescript. It was a good fight. It was okay, but I just can't be bothered to spend too much time on it. Also, Josh Padley had... Oh, no. Okay, I was out of order. Also, Josh Warrington came back, and he took on Asif Khan, I think was the guy's name. Let's see here. Asad Asif Khan. Hey, there you go. And he looked pretty decent. He did some classic Josh Warrington things, which consisted of hitting someone behind the back of the head, cheating, everything else that Josh Warrington has done in his career, which is essentially cheating and other kinds of cheating. And he had a British referee, so he didn't get punished for it. So that was fun. But he picks up the UD. Now, I had also picked Josh Padley to win by unanimous decision, but he went in there and he stopped Marko Savatinic in the 5th round. Yes, this Serbian or whatever was 13-0, but completely different levels of experience. I thought Padley actually looked quite good. Now, here's another problem, really quick before I move on. I tweet good stuff, okay? I don't tweet always good stuff, but I tweet some good stuff. I tweet some informative stuff. I let people know how to watch Ben Whittaker for Liam Cameron for absolutely zilch. Even if you had no subscriptions, I found a link where you could have watched that fight. I was informing the public. I was doing some due diligence. I put out a joke saying that Shakur Stevenson's resume is now so much more improved because Josh Padley knocked out the undefeated boogeyman, Marko Savatnic, and that gets hundreds of likes. And people are like, oh, he called him a boogeyman. This guy's crazy. Ha 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 ha. So it's like Twitter doesn't even reward you for tweeting anything good. Twitter wants you to tweet ridiculous nonsense, and they'll reward you in kind with that. But, you know, I put out a link on, hey guys, watch this fight for free. Isn't that helpful? And nobody cares. So just wanted to highlight that and how frustrating it is. Well, let's move on here. This Box Lab promotion card happened. I'm going to go through it really fast. I didn't do great on predictions here, but it wasn't even that great of a watch. So I had picked Lenier Perreault to knock out his opponent in the first round because have you seen the guy that he was fighting? This dude was not in the best of shape. I figured Perreault, the Cuban background, etc., etc. But no, he went to a decision, looked out of shape, looked terrible. Not a good performance. Also, Indri Cedeno, I thought actually he was going to be in a pretty difficult fight. But no, he ends up picking a really nice stoppage win there. That was good to see. Let me see if I can even pull it up here. But, you know, knowing my luck, that's not going to happen. Yeah, no, I'm not even going to bother. All right. Also, I had picked this guy, Kevin Brown, to win by a KO. So, of course, he went to a decision. The only one I got right was Pitufo Diaz getting a decision in his comeback fight after losing over in Puerto Rico. And then finally, all right, guys, I kind of knew that Gergen Havanesian was going to stop Dewan Calloway, but you may or may not know I'm a huge Dewan Calloway fan. I was rooting for the guy to at least have a good moment here or there, but no, the difference in class between the Olympic pedigree of Armenian Gergen Havanesian and the Irish club show level of Thomas McCarthy, the man that Dewan Calloway had just upset in a massive upset, completely different. Havanesian could potentially be in world title talks later in his career, whereas I never thought that was the case of Thomas No Party Carty. And yeah, Gergen picked up a knockout win there, but felt gutted for my guy, the 400-pound heavyweight Dewan Calloway. Let's move on. Oh, yeah, there was also, Sadruddin Akhmedov versus Elias Espadas. So I figured Espadas was on the downslide and Akhmedov undefeated. I mean, I didn't know too much about him. I never pretend to know more than I do, but I figured, again, writing was on the wall. But no, this actually went to a draw. Very interesting. Curious to see if they run it back. I would imagine, I mean, it's not like Elias Espadas has too many other big options on the table. I'm sure he'd appreciate running it back. And for Akhmedov's sake, you'd probably want to be able to say you beat every dude that you ever fought. So hopefully they schedule that rematch. And then Sergey Kovalev had his retirement fight over in Sherlebinsk against Artur Mann. I had picked Kovalev to pick up a unanimous decision, but Artur Mann, he had moments, but the punch resistance just not there. Looked to be actually the bigger man despite having the height disadvantage. Looks stocky, looks strong, but looks can be deceiving. And yeah, Sergey Kovalev went out with a fun fight, honestly. I believe it's even free on YouTube if you want to go back, watch the broadcast. It was a good fight while it lasted, but Sergey Kovalev, even at his very advanced age, Artur Mann had a record of, I think, 23-4, but he basically had lost to anyone of note he ever fought, and Kovalev is of note, so good stuff there. All right, let's get to now the news corner here. So another thing that happened over the past week that I'm really sorry, by the way, that I did not cover, I didn't know that the WBC Boxing Grand Prix was starting this past week. Now, if you see on the poster here, there is no date. The only thing I saw was Mauricio Suleiman. He tweeted, again, that's the president of the WBC. He had tweeted out in Riyadh for the Boxing Grand Prix, but I didn't know if that was for the purposes of scheduling, if he was... I really didn't know. I didn't know what to make of it. And then I saw after I posted the video, oh, people are weighing in. The fight's about to happen. And that's unfortunate on my behalf. But even if I was going to cover it, it was 4 nights of boxing. First night, it was 16 featherweights. Then it was 16 junior lightweights the next day, followed by 16 middleweights, and then... or 16 middleweight bouts, excuse me. So 32 fighters each night, and then 16 heavyweights. I thought that the super lightweights and the featherweights, I think, made for the best fights. The heavyweights were really not good. There's a man, his name is, oh my goodness. Oh, he's Uzbek. I'm supposed to know all of them. That's like my whole thing. Is this the heavyweight one? Oh, yes. Lazizbek Mulajanov. I think he's clearly going to win the heavyweight bracket. How much better he is than all the other heavyweights I saw there kind of makes the heavyweight bracket uninteresting to me, because it's basically, does Lazizbek lose in a gigantic upset, or does he win the whole thing? But the other ones... 160 had really good fights. I'm just looking through it here. This is all free on YouTube, by the way. 4 9-hour broadcasts you can go back and watch. But there were some really, really good fights. I'm looking over here to... This is now junior welterweights. Mujibilo Tursunov. I think that was a pretty good fight that had happened. Yeah, I'd have to go back and really put a log together. But overall... what are my notes? So you had Corey Erdman on the broadcast, who is, again, a consummate professional, a man who is, I think, the best fight caller now in the world. He was good. You had Barack, I think, of like Ak and Barack, and he was actually pretty decent. And you also had the guy from the UK on the broadcast as well. I think he was like a former world champion. But he was good. It was a good broadcast team. It really was. I enjoyed that trio. I thought they brought a lot of energy. The pacing was pretty decent. I thought the first day, the pacing was a little bad, but I think they quickly adjusted. Another thing was, for some reason, the WBC wanted to implement all of these special WBC boxing rules. One of them was, with 30 seconds left in the round, they had an air horn that they would squeak at 30, but then still they would do it classically where at 10 seconds they would hit the clapper. So in the last 30 seconds of a fight, it would go horn, 20 seconds, 10 seconds left, clapper, and then there was the other like ding for the round being over. It was like in the last 30 seconds, the fighters were bombarded with all these sounds. People were getting confused. They thought that the round was over when they weren't. Very strange. I don't think that you need both a 30 and 10-second reminder. That was bad. The good part about it was there was open scoring, and I used to be on the fence about open scoring. I really was. I thought, oh, well, what if a guy who's up, he coasts and he doesn't try to win because he knows he's up on the cards, all of that. Open scoring, I am now a fan of. I think that this Boxing Grand Prix has put me firmly in the corner of I am pro open scoring. Let people know where they are at in the fight. Don't have it be a mystery. And you know what? The way that they did open scoring was, it wasn't at the end of every round. It was at the end of every even round. So at the end of round 2, you'd know where you were. At the end of round 4, etc. And what I like about that is a good part of the fight game is that when you're in a really close fight and you're waiting to see, who did the judges pick, right? That anticipation, that was not erased whatsoever. There were still some razor close fights that you didn't know who it went to either way, and the open scoring did not spoil the winner. There was still that intensity, still that moment of what's going to happen next. I thought that was a really good addition by the WBC, like extra rules. So good stuff there. Let's move on, though. But overall, really good stuff. I'm looking forward to the rest of the tournament. Obviously, that was the 16 brackets, and now we're going to go to the 8, then 4, and then semifinals, etc., etc. Really good stuff. Moving on, though, so some news here. I had referred to this before when talking about Alberto Puello, but this is now the new proposed July 12th Ring Magazine card. Shout out to Source of Boxing for this fan-made poster. There is still not an official poster, and I also don't believe there is actually an official fight announcement. This is what is being brought forward by Mike Coppinger, formerly of ESPN, now of The Ring. But this is a really good card. So your main event, Edgar Berlanga versus Hamza Shiraz. Shiraz coming off of that draw versus Carlos Adames in which he possibly broke his hand. I'm not exactly sure how much confirmation we have on that, but was not a good performance by him. Edgar Berlanga, one fight removed from the fight with Canelo Alvarez, in which he picked up a first-round knockout win over Jonathan Gonzalez-Ortiz, I believe his name was. Now, the writing was on the wall for Edgar Berlanga to cross the street, go to PBC, chase a fight with Caleb Plant. But now that Caleb Plant is fighting Jose Rezendiz and Jamal Charlo is fighting Cornflake Lamana, with the two of them expected to to fight each other provided they both win, Edgar Berlanga is basically out of the PBC picture. This is a really big opportunity for him to get right back into the mix. Yes, he's had his comeback fight, but Hamza Shiraz is heavily backed by Turki Al-Sheikh, by Riyadh Season, and I think a really big win here for Edgar Berlanga can do amazing stuff for his career. And conversely, Hamza Shiraz was being heralded by many people I respect, by the way, as the best middleweight in the world. I was never sympathetic to that idea, but I did understand the hype. He did look phenomenal rising through the ranks. Obviously, the stoppage of Ammo Williams probably being a highlight there. But he has a lot of doubt now. He couldn't beat Carlos Adames that many people were, including myself, were picking him to win. So this can really dispel a lot of doubt. He can claim that the weight was just killing him, which he's a massive middleweight. I don't mind the move to 168 here. Good fight. However, I don't believe this is a deserving main event over Shakur Stevenson, William Zepeda. Take out the name factor element. Call me old-fashioned, unless there is a really good reason for otherwise. I prefer title fights in main events. Belts, I still think that they have value. I still think that they matter. And I think Shakur Stevenson, William Zepeda is a fight that does deserve a main event spotlight. Now, a lot has happened with this fight. They've tried to make Shakur Stevenson versus William Zepeda, I think 3 or more times now. According to reports by Dan Raphael and others, Shakur Stevenson has split effectively from Eddie Hearn to make this fight, including working with Lou DiBella. Now, Eddie Hearn has come out in interviews since then saying that Shakur is still under contract. I went on a brief thing on my Twitter page about it at PhilXFights if you want to see more in depth about my thoughts. But Eddie Hearn, when he had first signed Shakur Stevenson, had set out a roadmap. His roadmap was the following. First, a fight with Joe Cordina, which never happened. But okay, first, basically a tune-up fight to introduce him to Matchroom. Second fight, his mandatory versus William Zepeda. Third fight, Gervonta Davis, right? In any interview you could find Eddie Hearn, he would say, okay, Joe Cordina, or what actually turned out to be Josh Padley, William Zepeda, Gervonta Davis, right? He would constantly say 1, 2, 3. That's what we're going to do. Now in interviews, he has changed his tune. I don't want to be told that he's not. There are certain people that are trying to tell me otherwise. It's just not the case. He's completely changed his tune, and he is now saying, he went from saying it's always a 2-fight deal, or no. He said in the interview today, I've always said it was a 2-fight deal. We've always made it very clear how it's a 2-fight deal. We love working with Shakur Stevenson, but hopefully he re-signs with us. He's completely changed his tune. Now he's saying, it was always a 2-fight deal. There was never expectations of going on to a third fight. That's ridiculous. I don't believe it. In every interview, he had constantly said, Tank, we're coming for you. This is the best lightweight in the world. We're coming for you, Tank. And now it's, it was always just 2 fights. And maybe he resigns, but maybe he doesn't. Who really knows? I'm going to pretend like there was no real falling out process. Yes, there was. we don't have the complete story, but that combined with the other cryptic tweets that Shakur Stevenson was putting out, criticizing Turki Al-Sheikh, not getting the minimums that he thought he was guaranteed, all of that. There's something going on there. There is a tension. And I mean, I had called since Shakur Stevenson had signed to Matchroom. I had posted the day of that being announced. I said, this isn't going to go through. This isn't going to work. Lo and behold, it didn't. It didn't even last a year. There was supposed to be 3 promised fights. We've barely got one, and we have another one maybe down the line. Yeah, not a good working relationship. On this card also, Alberto Puello taking on Subriel Matias. What can you say beyond really good fight between 2 of the best 140-pounders in the world? Looking forward to that. And David Morrell versus Imam Kataev. This is very interesting. So David Morrell choosing not to take any easy fights. I rate Imam Kataev highly. We just saw on the George Kambosos card a few weeks ago when he took on the man Palacio. It was a good learning fight for Kataev. Kataev, shades of Beterbiev. I'm going to keep saying that. Obviously now the perfect knockout record not intact, but still a man that I think has a lot of upside in the sport. David Morrell with a win over Imam Kataev would really put him right back in the mix for another world title shot, big fights at 175. And as you can see, look, Gvozdyk is back, Morrell coming back against Kataev. 175 is flush with really fun, interesting contenders. Eventually you're going to have more 168-pounders move up as well. 175 is going to be a great division for the next few years. We've got plenty of fun, interesting, exciting contenders. So good card here. Another fight that was recently announced, Junto Nakatani and Ryosuke Nishida are going to fight. So Junto Nakatani was this wasn't a problem with Nakatani. No, so Ryosuke Nishida originally had a mandatory fight against a man by the name of Salas. What's his full name? Why can't I find him? Let me see here. So Nishida Salas. Jose Salas. Okay. So Salas is the mandatory here. It didn't look like they were going to be able to get the proper step-aside money to make this fight, but that's all in the past now. We've got it. Coming up later this year, Junto Nakatani, Ryosuke Nishida. So this is the best fight at 118 pounds, bar none. So you currently have 4 champions at bantamweight right now. They're all from Japan. So you might go, well, why are these 2 Japanese champions the best in class at 118 pounds? Okay. Well, you have the other champions, that being oh my goodness. Come on. For proof of concept. Okay. So you have here Yoshiki Taikei, who is coming off of a win over Daigo Higa, but it was a very, very closely contested fight. And the other champion in this weight class is Seiya Tsutsumi, who's also coming off of now a draw versus Daigo Higa. So Taikei, I guess he also has somewhat of a case for being a top bantamweight, but realistically, it's Junto Nakatani and Ryosuke Nishida. Nishida dethroned, by the way, Manny Rodriguez, who I thought was the best bantamweight in the world, following Inoue moving up to 122 pounds. This was back when Junto Nakatani was at 115 pounds. Since then, Nishida took out Rodriguez. Nakatani moved up to 118. He dethroned the man that dethroned Nonito Donaire, that being Alejandro Santiago. Since then, picked up some decent wins, including last time out, destroying the 28-0 David Contreras, who is another top contender at the time. This is just such a good fight between 2 massive bantamweights. I'm curious to see how both of them make the weight. I hope that they do both healthily. I hope that we see them both at 100%. Yes, Junto Nakatani is going to be a clear favorite here. He's a man that, provided everything goes well, could potentially defeat Naoya Inoue in a year's time. But I've really been appreciating the skill and craft of Ryosuke Nishida. He is a killer. He is willing to put everything on the line. Blood, guts, skill, technique. He's got it all. Nothing else you can say beyond. This is a a perfect fight, and one that demands public attention from everywhere, not just Japan. Okay, that concludes our news segment here. Now let's get to the predictions. So, normally I like to scour the internet for all of the boxing cards that I think are of relevancy. I concluded, after a lot of research, more research than I wanted to do, that there's not a single other event this week that is worth the time or viewership. There are some main events I think that are worth an eyeball, but nothing that is top to bottom a complete viewing experience. Besides, of course, the Fatal Fury City of the Wolves Ring Magazine card, Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. The father's legacies on the line, not really, but a British rivalry unlike we've seen in quite a few years. An excellent fight of two men looking to establish honor for their families. I'm looking forward to this a lot, very much so. But before I get into that main event, because I believe it deserves its own little time slot here, let's get to the undercard. So I actually think, all things being considered, they could have made the undercard dreadful, right? So Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, not the biggest names here in the United States, but massive names over in the UK, based on the father's legacies, based on really a lot of what Chris Eubank Jr. has done in his professional career, not so much Conor Benn. But the fight will sell no matter what. But they put a very respectable undercard together. So the first fight I'm going to go over here, Anthony Yarde taking on Lyndon Arthur. This is a trilogy. Lyndon Arthur won, I believe, by split decision in the first fight. Anthony Yarde went on to knock Lyndon Arthur out in their rematch in, I believe, 4 rounds or so. I can double check that promptly. Let's see here. He knocked him out, in the 4th round. So how does the trilogy go? What are we thinking? So I have a couple of thoughts. Lyndon Arthur, I believe his last fight was against the aforementioned Liam Cameron, a win by split decision. Before that, got lost to Dimitri Bivol, lost every moment of that fight. Before that, took on Brian Suarez, in which he won by 10th round knockout, but that was a fight that he was losing almost every single minute of. And I just can't trust Lyndon Arthur. It's not that he had a bad performance against Dimitri Bivol. Okay, Bivol's one of the best in the sport. But the Cameron fight, you barely won. The Suarez fight, you were about to lose before you found a Hail Mary knockout. And yes, Anthony Yarde is also coming off of a very bad performance against a guy by the name of Rolfs Wilkins. Yes, very bad performance on his behalf. But for some reason, despite how frustrating it is, Anthony Yarde seems to constantly be the best version of himself against good opposition. And Lyndon Arthur is of that ilk. For those reasons, I'm going to go with Anthony Yarde to pick up a knockout in the 7th round. I just think that it's going to be a classic Anthony Yarde fight. He's going to be way faster than Lyndon Arthur. Lyndon Arthur used to have a really fast, snappy jab. I think he's looked a little bit deflated. He was essentially retired, and he came out of retirement just for this fight because it got him out of bed. But I just think Anthony Yarde, much more to gain, much more to lose. Give me him by knockout. I think that in a big card like this, Tottenham Hotspur, 60,000 in attendance, supposedly, on a massive show, this is the sort of occasion where Yarde performs his best. Give me him by knockout. Moving on. Liam Smith, after 19 months out of the ring, is taking on the 25-year-old Irishman, Aaron McKenna. I've seen a lot of discourse about how this is a 50-50 fight, that you really don't know who to pick. Now, I had to do a lot of research for this card, like I had mentioned. I was not fully familiar with Aaron McKenna, but I looked into him, and I think he actually has exactly the tools needed to handle Liam Smith at this point in his career. Liam Smith, coming off of a very deflated performance against Chris Eubank Jr., in which he injured his ankle, looked like a shell of his former self, got beat up and stopped, whereas Aaron McKenna taking on really good opposition. So his last fight, he took on an undefeated American by the name of, by the name of Giovanni Estella. Knocked him out in the 10th round over in Japan on that terrible Japan Matchroom card. But I'm not even going to highlight that. I'm going to highlight his win over Usma Lima. Now, Usma Lima is actually a man I've heard of before. He's coming off of 2 wins over Sungdeep Singh Badi, a 12 round upset win that I actually managed to watch. Really good stuff there. And he beat Haro Matosian, who is another 18-0, 19-0, and he was able to make him quit on his stool. And Aaron McKenna, it was a close fight with Usma Lima, but that's a really good level to be at. Aaron McKenna has been active. Liam Smith, only getting older, inactive. Everything in boxing history tells you to pick the younger guy. And I'm going to take the safe bet here. Give me McKenna by UD. I think Liam Smith is going to find a way to weather the storm a little bit, use veteran tricks, be able to survive an onslaught provided that McKenna gives one. But I have to back the youth here. I like what I've seen from McKenna based off the video footage I'm able to observe. I think he's got the tools. I think that he'll get it done. He's only 25. You got to back him here. If Liam Smith wins, it'll be a really nice upset to propel his career forward. I just don't see it. Also on this card, Chev Clark taking on Vidal Riley. Now, this one is so interesting to me because a few years ago, Chev Clark was in the Olympics. He was undefeated. He's taking on these international contenders. And Vidal Riley was like, will he fight Jake Paul? There was a large portion of Vidal Riley's career I distinctly remember that was like, he might fight in Misfits. He's going to be a YouTuber boxer. Now, times change. Chev Clark, coming off of that loss against Mosquea for the European title, before that, had an absolute blockbuster war with Efetobor Apochi. And Vidal Riley, I watched some of his recent fights back against like Mikhail Lawal for the, I think, English cruiserweight title. I could be wrong. But I think he's going to win this fight for one clear reason: speed. So not only is Vidal Riley 27 versus a 34-year-old Chev Clark, Clark in his last 2 fights is coming off of more damage than anything Vidal Riley has sustained. So Clark is older, he's coming off some damage, and obviously those things you can surpass. But I watched some tape on Vidal Riley. He is really fast. And one thing about Chev Clark is he is just not the fastest. I mean, that's a very, blunt way of saying it, but I really think if Vidal Riley boxes smart, pays attention the entire time, doesn't shut off for a second, doesn't let Clark land a really huge shot. Because if you remember, again, so we can talk about the Apochi fight, we can talk about the Mosquea fight for Chev Clark, but the other fight that Chev Clark had recently was against Ellis Zorro. And Ellis Zorro, I don't care what anyone says, Ellis Zorro was easily winning that fight. Easily. Then Clark found the off switch and knocked Zorro out cold. But I think Ellis Zorro has some chin problems across his career. I think Vidal Riley, really go back, watch that Ellis Zorro fight. I don't think you're going to win this fight the way that Apochi almost did, and by the way, Mosquea did, where you're going to go tit for tat, blow for blow, and out muscular this guy. I mean, maybe I'll wait to see the weigh-ins. Maybe Vidal Riley is larger than Chev Clark. I'm not so confident in that. But I think Vidal Riley is fast enough to be able to win a clear-cut unanimous decision. Finally on this card, Chris Billam-Smith versus Brandon Clanton. Man, Chris Billam-Smith is coming off of a unified title fight versus Zurdo Ramirez. Brandon Clanton is coming off of 3 back-to-back KOs following his 2 career losses that were both highly contested and both arguably should have been in his favor. You could make a really spirited argument Brandon Clanton should be an undefeated cruiserweight at 22-0. I thought he beat David Light. I thought the fight against Soslan Asbarov was, again, not really correctly scored. Since then, knocked out 12-1 Carlos Romero on a Pro Box card, went over to Russia, stopped the 12-1 Alexei Egorov in a very fun fight that I watched the whole way through live. That was a good one. And the thing about Chris Smith that I can't get out of my head, let's look at his run of late. So Gilberto Ramirez just outclassed him. I know that the score is 116, 112. Yeah. That was not a close fight. You got completely hustled. Before that, the Richard Riakporhe fight, Chris Smith won. Riakporhe looked like a husk out there. I don't know if the weight was killing him or what he had going on. He did not look like himself. The Mateusz Masternak fight, Chris Smith was arguably losing. Let's look at the cards here. 67-67, 65-68, 65-68. He was getting comprehensively beat by Mateusz Masternak until Masternak's rib exploded in the corner. I still have no clarity on what really happened that night, but all of a sudden Masternak can't come out. His rib exploded or something. And then before that, the Coley fight was so dirty and disgusting. What's a clean win here? I guess the Riakporhe win is the cleanest because he did comprehensively win. But I think Brandon Glanton could beat these guys. Based on what I've seen, I am so conscientious of the American bias because it is so flagrant. But I just think Brandon Glanton is the better fighter, despite the world title experience of Chris Smith. And I think Brandon Glanton, who has been screwed over by judges twice now, I think he's going to look at this opportunity and take it by the horns. I don't think he's going to let this opportunity slip him by. And the other thing is, just looking at them, you're like, oh, look at babyface Chris Smith, whereas, Glanton, he's up there in age, right? No, Glanton's actually 33, and Chris Smith is 34, almost 35. Glanton is actually the younger man who's taken, at least I believe, a slightly less damage throughout his career. The Chamberlain fight was gritty for Smith. The two fights with Riakporhe. Brandon Glanton by KO in the 10th round. This is my one. Every week I try to get one where, maybe people are all expecting Chris Smith to win. Give me Glanton. I've just got a feeling about it. I think his speed and power, because one thing about Zurdo Ramirez, right? Zurdo was able to hurt Chris Smith, but it was with clean, sharp, fast punching. But Zurdo Ramirez was a guy that was super middleweight at one point. Brandon Glanton is a fully fledged cruiserweight. I think that the difference in power is going to be stark and obvious. And I think if Glanton hurts Smith, because I think he might be faster than Smith too. Smith is not very fast. Give me Glanton to be faster and more powerful and find a way to get in on the much, Bill Smith's got the height, he's got the length, but I think Glanton is going to pressure his way in, not let this opportunity slip him past, realize that with a win here, he's in world title conversation once again, and I think he'll find the stoppage late. And I think all the Brits will say, and nobody could see this coming, Chris Smith upset. But I think this is a very close fight. I'd love to know the odds. Again, as a general rule, I never check the odds, but I'd love to see it. I imagine Glanton is some kind of crazy underdog because people don't understand how good he is. But I think this will be the Jorge Garcia of this week. I really do. Let's move on to the last bit here. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. An excellent, excellent main event. Now, I've heard all week about how this is a 50-50 fight, about how Conor Benn might just go out there and knock Chris Eubank Jr. out in the first 4 rounds. Eddie Hearn is saying, I've never seen Conor Benn so focused. I've never seen him be such an animal before. All this nonsense. But honestly, I don't care if this ages poorly. Well, I guess no, I do care. What am I saying? I would care if this ages poorly. But I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to be bluntly honest. How does Chris Eubank Jr. lose this fight? Forget the fatherhood rivalry. Forget the fight that was supposed to happen 2 years ago. All of that stuff. Just throw it all out in the trash. Yeah, they had a fight scheduled 2 years ago. Conor Benn popped for steroids that people want to pretend never happened for some reason. How does Chris Eubank Jr. lose this fight? Now, I know what you can say. Well, he lost to Liam Smith. Yada, yada. Okay, sure. Did you watch the rematch between Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith? Chris Eubank Jr. looked phenomenal. Like, I know Smith injured his ankle, but Chris Eubank Jr. looked way better. Then I hear, oh, but Eubank, he struggled with Kamil Serezmeta in his last fight. Like, no, he didn't. Like, Kamil Serezmeta, he lasted about the same amount of time against Gennady Golovkin and Jaime Munguia that he did with Chris Eubank Jr., which is about 7-ish rounds. So that puts Eubank on par with them. Let's contrast that with Conor Benn. Conor Benn, his last fight was against Peter Dobson, right? Okay, his performance against Peter Dobson was... Can you even... Hold on. So Conor Benn's last fight was against Peter Dobson, in which he won 119-109, 118-110. Okay. That's about the same level of performance that Jaleel Hackett had. And I don't think that Jaleel Hackett would beat Chris Eubank Jr. Now, I know that's a little bit mathy, but still hear me out. Then Conor Benn fought Rodolfo Orozco and looked really bad. Before that, he fought Chris Van Heerden and Chris Algieri. You know, I like Chris Algieri. I've met him in person. Cool guy. But that wasn't, prime. Chris will even tell you to his face, he's not a welterweight. This is, again, when Conor Benn was on PEDs, whether or not anyone wants to admit it or not. What are his other best wins? Adrian Granados, Samuel Vargas. These are all guys that were contenders before they had 6-8 losses on their resume. Let's contrast that with Chris Eubank Jr. Eubank Jr. has beat now Liam Smith, Liam Williams, Matvey Korobov, James DeGale, Avni Yildirim, Arthur Abraham, Gary O'Sullivan, Nick Blackwell. He had a split decision with Billy Joe Saunders. Now, I don't want to do the fraud thing of like, oh, I'm just reading that box score off. I do know those, just not as succinctly. But the main point is, Chris Eubank Jr. has been fighting good competition for a decade now, and he loses to guys like George Groves, who are like British legends. Sure, Conor Benn's undefeated, but he's also the smaller guy moving up. And for what everyone wants to say about, Chris Eubank Jr. can only hydrate 10 pounds. Sure, that will hurt him, but he's been fighting at 160 now for a while. People don't realize that he stopped fighting. He stopped fighting at super middleweight in 2019. Against Korobov, he fought at middleweight. Marcus Morrison, he fought at 162 catchweight. Against Wanik, whatever, 164-pound catchweight. Then Liam Williams, 160. The two Liam Smith fights were at 160, and Kamil Serezmeta was at 160. He's been fighting at 160. He's not this big super middleweight that's draining himself like he's never done before. No, he's been adjusting his body and diet to 160. Whereas Conor Benn has been having these fights at 150 and 153. His power has not translated to the weight class. And he got busted for the steroids, so, he might still be on them, but he had to, scale down whatever amount he was on. If these two fighters didn't have all this back and forth stuff, and if their dads had never fought, and this was just a random fight between Joe Schmo and Jimmy Schmo, and you had to just show me their resumes and said who wins, you gotta pick Chris Eubank Jr. clearly. For that reason, give me Chris Eubank Jr. by knockout in the 9th round. He's coming off of 2 knockouts. I think he'll make it 3. I think Conor Benn will come out fast. I think, all the people that have been telling him, yeah, go out there and knock Chris Eubank Jr. out. I think he will listen to that. He doesn't have the experience. I don't think he can properly pace himself. And I think Chris Eubank Jr. has... The only thing he doesn't have going for him is the difference in age. Because Chris Eubank Jr. is how old now? So let's see. Chris Eubank Jr. age. Let's double check. He's 35. Conor Benn's 28. Okay. But 35 is still fine. This isn't so bad. I know I kind of use this logic with the Aaron McKenna thing. But again, Aaron McKenna honestly has better wins than Conor Benn does. And Liam Smith is arguably not as good as Chris Eubank Jr. I understand that they're 1-1, but again, hear me out. Yeah, I gotta go with Chris Eubank Jr. I really do. I hope it's a good fight. while it lasts. I hope the atmosphere is amazing. A nice big British fight. I'm all in favor. I'm looking forward to this just as much as a guy from Yorkshire or Newcastle or London or wherever else. I'm really on your side here. I think that this is a great fight. So great that I'm not even covering any other boxing that's fighting this weekend because it's all a bunch of small shows in America that are going to have like 300 watchers. No, I'm all on board. Give me a blockbuster, give me a spectacle, and give me Chris Eubank Jr. to win by 9th round knockout. And I will see you all next time on oh my goodness. Oh yeah, great rebrand, Phil. We're not even gonna remember what we're recalling our thing. Hold on. I will see you all next time on episode 8 of What You Need to Know About Boxing.